Hello, Outlander. If you're anything like me, you've poured thousands of hours into Elder Scrolls games. Today, I would like to talk about Skyrim, the fifth installment in the series, and how I believe that the people of Skyrim need to band together, start a violent revolution against the Imperials and Stormcloak rule, and seize the means of production from the nobility and merchant class. Now, this is only the first video in a series of videos I'm going to be doing about the topic. This video will cover only the revolution against the Stormcloaks and the Empire. The next video will talk about getting rid of the nobility and bourgeoisie class, and the last one will be about rebuilding Skyrim and abolishing hierarchies. This video is purely about fictional events in a video game. It has no real-world political implications whatsoever. I, a law-abiding citizen of the United States, am 100% against all political violence. And I, for one, would never promote the idea that we need to guillotine the bourgeoisie.
Do you take me for a fool?
Real quick, this video will be discussing topics such as war, political violence, racism, ghettoization, fascism, genocide, and a lot of other nasty topics. If that's not your thing, please click off this video. Now, let's start out this conversation by describing the land of Skyrim. It's kind of complicated if you aren't aware of the game. Skyrim in the 4th era is being ravaged by a brutal civil war. The civil war includes two political factions, the Stormcloaks and the Imperials. The Stormcloaks are nationalists, who believe that the native people of Skyrim, we'll come back to this later, the Nords, should rule Skyrim. The Stormcloaks are led by Ulfric Stormcloak, their political and military leader who is wanted by the opposing faction for killing the king of Skyrim, King Torygg. We'll come back to Ulfric later, just know that he is the main political figurehead, military leader, and hero of the Stormcloaks. The other faction involved in the Civil War are the Imperial Legion. The Imperials represent the Septim Empire, which rules over many provinces, including Skyrim. The Empire stands for hereditary, centralized rule. The Imperial Legion in Skyrim is ruled by General Tullius, who serves as the provincial governor of Skyrim. The Imperials are supported by Elisif the Fair, the Jarl of Hafengar, and the widow of King Torygg, who Ulfric Stormcloak killed. The Stormcloaks are strongly tied to the religious beliefs surrounding a historical figure known as Talos, or Tiber Septim. However, worship of Talos is being suppressed in Skyrim because the Empire signed a treaty with a powerful enemy known as the Aldmeri Dominion, called the White Gold Concordat. To be brief, since the lore on this is so dense, the Aldmeri Dominion, specifically the Third Aldmeri Dominion, is a union of several races, mainly the Elves and Beast races, headed off by the High Elves, or the Altmer. The Aldmeri Dominion is an ethno-nationalist organization which believes that elves, known as the Mer, are superior to the races of man. Talos was a man, not an elf, so he challenges the beliefs of the Aldmeri Dominion. For this reason, the Stormcloaks really hate the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion. They also have a lot of animosity towards elves in general. I think it's about time we talk about race. Racial tensions in the world of Elder Scrolls are by no means simple to explain. There is so much lore and history behind it all, I couldn't possibly explain everything. Instead, I'm going to stick to what is relevant to Skyrim's current political climate. Let's start with the Nords. As I mentioned earlier, the Nords are a race of man known as the native people of Skyrim. They actually immigrated to Skyrim from another continent. They settled the land and fought many wars with the actual natives of Skyrim, such as the Dwemer, known as the Dwarves, and the Falmer, known as the Snow Elves. Nords are usually traditionalists and are highly connected to their ancient cultural beliefs. The next race are the Imperials, which are actually two distinct ethnicities, the Namibians and the Colovians. The Imperials are a race of man that come from Cyrodiil, which is the seat of the Septim Empire and the home of the Imperial Legion. The Imperials were once the most powerful race in the world, but a brutal interdimensional crisis seriously crippled them. They are known for their championing of diversity, welcoming all races into their empire, but also as conquerors. They don't really ask before they welcome you into their empire, if you know what I mean. The Red Guards are a race of man that, like the Nords, come from a different continent to inhabit their current home, Hammerfell. They are strongly against the Empire and its efforts to take over their homeland. They don't really play a big part in the Civil War in Skyrim, so that's all I'm going to say about them. Next are the Bretons, a race of man from the province next door to Skyrim called High Rock. They're actually a hybrid race of man and elf. They have a lot of cool lore, but they don't do much in the Civil War conflict, so That's the races of man. Next are the elves. The most contextually important elven race for our purposes are the Altmer, also known as the High Elves. They come from the Somerset Isles and are currently being ruled by the Altmeri Dominion. There aren't many High Elves in Skyrim, with the exception of the Thalmor, who are there with the Emperor's permission to root out Talos worship. The Bosmer, known as the Wood Elves, well, they're not really important either, so we'll skip them. The Dark Elves, the Dunmer, hail from the land of Morrowind. Morrowind is a very alien land that was recently ravaged by an explosion of a huge volcano known as Red Mountain, which covered their homeland in ash, making it virtually unlivable. Many of the Dunmer have come to Skyrim as refugees, and they face a lot of discrimination because of it. Though the Dunmer were once the most powerful force in the world, Morrowind refugees have been regulated to ghettos, like the Grey Quarter in Windhelm, which serves as the headquarters of the Stormcloaks. The leaders of the Stormcloaks, Ulfric, doesn't really treat the Dunmer very well, and most Stormcloaks don't like them in general. There's also the Orcs, the Orsimer, but they don't really do anything significant in the war either. The next are the Khajiit and Argonians, beast races, who, don't really matter much in the Civil War. Actually, the Argonians do matter a little. The Argonian dockworkers in Windhelm, the capital of the Stormcloak army, are greatly mistreated and are relegated to living outside the city in a segregated communal living area known as the Argonian Assemblage. Their way of life is almost entirely owned by the Stormcloaks and a wealthy family known as the Shattershields. So, those are the races of the Elder Scrolls. Back to politics. So, Skyrim is embroiled in a civil war. Two factions are tearing each other apart, one calling for Skyrim to stay a vassal state of the failing empire, and the other wanting to turn Skyrim into some sort of isolationist ethno-state cult of personality ruled by a king/military general. Which is right? Neither of them. In the game, you are forced to pick between two factions if you want to finish the game. You can't finish the Civil War questline unless you pick between the two, Stormcloaks or Imperials. If you don't pick, Skyrim stays in a perpetual state of war-torn shittiness. There just isn't a third option. But what if there was? What if you could help Skyrim throw off the tyrannical shackles of the Empire and drive out the Stormcloaks? What if you could liberate Skyrim? It would be difficult, obviously. The entire province is peppered with military outposts, and every major city is aligned with one side or the other. You may argue that it is impossible for the people to rise up and liberate themselves from their oppressors, that the Stormcloaks and the Imperials are too powerful. I disagree. The people of Skyrim outnumber their oppressors, but they also don't need to utilize a straightforward war either. Guerrilla tactics, community organizing, espionage, and sabotage tactics could be used in order to greatly weaken the enemy. The people of Skyrim don't even necessarily need to win a war, they just need to make it inconvenient enough, unprofitable enough, for the oppressors to give up. Once you become ungovernable, the oppressors will scatter and look for easier targets. As Bakunin said, by striving to do the impossible, man has achieved what is possible. Those who have cautiously done no more than they believed possible have never taken a single step forward. Now, I'm no military strategist. I can't tell you exactly how the people of Skyrim should release themselves. However, I can tell you that I think it's morally right for them to do so. Don't forget, political violence is already taking place in Skyrim. It's political violence perpetrated by the state. Both the Imperials and the Stormcloaks are actively engaging in political violence, so if the people fought back against those two forces, it would be self-defense. Let's talk a little bit more about the Septim Empire and the Imperials. The Septim Empire makes its immense wealth off the backs of the many provinces which make up its vassal states. For example, the people of Skyrim enrich the Empire because the Empire takes resources from Skyrim back to the Empire in order to keep the Empire going. Some may argue that Skyrim gets protection or access to commerce in return, but do they? I mean, Skyrim is under Imperial rule, technically, but it's still involved in a huge civil war. The Empire also does nothing to curb corruption among the nobility, and most of the citizens of Skyrim will never see the wealth that is made by the merchant class from being involved with the Empire. Most of Skyrim's citizens have nothing to do with the East Empire Company, the merchant company which is run by the Empire. The Empire only serves to make the rich richer off the backs of the poor. How is the average citizen kept safer by the Empire? How is the average citizen's wealth affected by the Empire? It isn't. So what about the Stormcloaks? They want Skyrim to be independent. Well, no, they don't. The Stormcloaks want some of Skyrim to be free. They want the Nords to have supremacy over Skyrim, a land which they aren't native to and have no claims over, no matter how much they say they do. They are just as much foreign to Skyrim as the Dunmer are. Also, the Stormcloaks are built entirely around a cult of personality, Ulfric Stormcloak. What happens when Ulfric dies? Who succeeds him? Yes, their goals of making Talos worship legal again is a noble one, but their methods for doing so involve creating an ethno-state where Nords are the privileged class. Also, the Stormcloaks would essentially be endorsing a state religion, which is never good. This isn't even getting into the fact that the Stormcloaks are actively suppressing groups in Skyrim, like the Dunmer and the Forsworn of the Reach. Both of these factions are bad for Skyrim and its people. They do nothing to enrich the lives of the common folk, and all the war is doing is costing countless lives, tearing apart families, and distracting from the true threat. The Thalmor. That's right, remember them? The Aldmeri Dominion? The fascist, elven, supremacist, religious extremists who want to take over the world? That's the people who Skyrim should be focusing on. Am I saying that the Thalmor are the Nazis of Skyrim? Yes. Yes, I am. Stopping the Stormcloaks and the Imperials isn't just morally correct, but it's also the best hope Skyrim has to defend themselves against the Thalmor. You can't fight off a huge horde of fascist supremacists if you're just busy fighting your own civil war. There's a quote by George Orwell that says, "The war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous. Hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. This new version is the past, and no different past can have ever existed. In principle, the war effort is always planned to keep society on the brink of starvation. The war is waged by the ruling group against its own subjects, and its object is not the victory over either Eurasia or East Asia, but to keep the very structure of society intact. The people of Skyrim should turn away from their squabbles about race, nationality, culture, and religion, and instead unite as a single people to oust the oppressive forces which seek to take advantage of their suffering." One point I want to address when it comes to morality is the fact that by liberating themselves from the Stormcloaks and the Empire, some of the soldiers are going to die. This is probably the hardest topic to talk about, just because it hits so close to home. I know that most of the soldiers in these two factions are probably just average people who joined up because they believed in the cause. They wanted to make a difference. But their cause is killing Skyrim. I would hope that those soldiers, once they see the revolution of the people, would leave their army and take up arms with the people. That's my hope. But not all soldiers would join the revolution. Some of them would die. When it comes to killing in a war, I've been really torn. On the one hand, I think it is just to die for a cause that you believe in, that fighting for what's right is morally correct. On the other hand, I hate the idea of death and suffering. Whenever any war is fought, one has to ask themselves if the inevitable death of enemy soldiers is worth fighting against tyranny. When the time comes, I hope that the people of Skyrim can make that choice, and that they make the correct one. I don't have a good answer to this question, to the question of whether or not it's worth it. All I can say is that the goals of the revolution are correct. Does that justify the deaths of the enemy? I don't know. And I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. One of the things you have to remember is that liberating Skyrim from the Stormcloaks and the Empire isn't just about politics, it's about people's lives. There are people suffering under this rule. There are people starving, rotting away in prison, being executed, having their rights taken away. The people of Skyrim have to stand together. They have to defeat the Stormcloaks and the Empire, and take back Skyrim for the people. I just wanted to say thank you for watching this video, which I know is a little bit of a strange topic, but I hope it was interesting for you. I'm going to be releasing part 2 pretty soon, and part 2 is going to be about nobility and the merchant class in Skyrim. And then part 3 is going to talk about how to rebuild Skyrim, how Skyrim doesn't need a hierarchy, either politically, socially, whatever. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know and tell me how I could have improved. What are your opinions on politics in Skyrim? What are your opinions about political violence? Please keep the comments civil and don't say anything that would make the FBI investigate you. Thank you.
You no longer bear the burden of prophecy. You have achieved your destiny. You are free. All fate sealed and sins redeemed. If you have pity, mourn the lost. But let the weeping cease. The blight is gone, and the sun's golden honey gilds the land.